All right, watch until the end because I'm going to reveal to you five. I say one, two, three, four, five security issues in this video concerning a Flask app done in Python. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get right on into it. Shall we? All right. So if you look, you will see a scenario and then the app.py code that I have here. So let's look at it. Let's see. So you're reviewing a simple Flask application that allows users to track expenses and view their monthly budget. The app, it works, but it contains several issues related to security, performance, and maintainability. So we want to be able to maintain code. We want our code to be secure and we want it to perform well, right? So I'm going to go over over the entire code, okay? But I want you to be on the lookout. Get your radar on, get your spy glasses on, whatever you need to, and let's look at this code and see if we can figure out what is going on and how we can make it better. Okay? So we want to improve code as we go along. We want to be good software engineers and code inspectors, and feature enhancers, things like that. So if you were to be asked to add a feature to where security is adhered to, this will be the type of video that you need to get along with. Okay. So let's get started. From Flask, import Flask, request render template string. Okay. So this is just a simple um, import command where we're going to be using Flask. We're going to use request and the render template string. Okay. We're also going to import SQLite 3. So that's going to be our database connection. Okay. So where we're going to be able to keep track of somebody's budget. You know what I'm saying? So they'll have a dashboard. They'll be able to go into the dashboard and then they'll be able to see what's going on with their budget and input and track their budget expenses. Okay. But let's go ahead and continue on to the next line of code. App equal flags, under name, and that is just to get this app started. And then we're going to um, have the app.route, the dashboard route. That lets us get into the dashboard so the user can see what's on their unique screen for their user name, right? So for their user ID, it's equal request.args.get user ID. Okay. And then we have a connection to the database. The database is called what? I don't know. We don't have anybody tuned in, so I'm going to answer that question. Budget.db. Okay. Then after budget.db has been connected to, we set up a cursor. That's where the actual information lies on inside of the database. Okay, so we'll set up a cursor to the connection, and then we'll go ahead and apply our first query assignment. Okay, so we're going to assign um, a select statement. So this is a little bit of SQL if you've never seen it before. So, the triple quotes is how we identify a multi-line string. So basically, it's going to cover more than one line, and we want to be able to capture the whole thing without breaking it up. But, putting enter, but not breaking up as far as the query assignment is concerned. Okay. So we're assigning the variable to have a select statement, and there's a category and there's an amount, and it's going to be coming from expenses. Okay. Where the user ID, so expenses is a table in there inside of the budget database, and we're going to be looking for a field called user ID, and then we'll grab that user ID. Okay. Let's keep going. Okay, so we have that user ID. Then afterwards, we're going to go to cursor.execute. So basically, we set up the string query, and then after that, then we call it, right? We basically execute it. We we set up the string query, and then we execute it. Okay? All right. The next thing we do is assign expenses. Expenses is going to be all the information in the data at the cursor, right? Because that fetch all is basically going to grab all that information from from the database. Okay, so then we are going to assign a total. Total is actually going to be the sum of all the rows for expenses. So that'll be the total sum of expenses. Then afterwards, the HTML is going to be assigned to the monthly budget. Then there's going to be a UL. What's that? Unordered list. So there's a for loop inside that kind of goes through, and it says for category, comma, amount in expenses. So it's grabbing all the things that we want, all the category and amount, and putting it into a list. So it's going to be showing it in a list wise, everything that's in expenses. Okay. Then it's gonna at the bottom it's gonna show the total spent, and that's gonna be the total that was calculated in the previous rows, right? So what are those in the previous rows? It's gonna be all the expenses row by row. Okay. Yeah, so that's what's gonna be in HTML. The HTML is sitting right here inside the dashboard. Okay. Well, we want to render the template upon return. So once this thing is called, it's going to send this template, the HTML and the expenses and all of that good stuff. So is that right? Are there any suggestions? I don't want to give the answer too fast. I want to give opportunity for you to answer. See if you notice any security vulnerabilities, anything that might be a little sideways, that's not usual, that might not be best practice when it comes to setting up, when it comes to the performance, when it comes to security, anything of that nature, because we do have five security issues. We have five issues in place that we want to figure out, like, what's really going on and why it is what it is, right? So talk to me. Go ahead and put in the chat if you see something that's just not right. I'm going to scroll on down for the rest of the code review, okay? All right. Well, basically that's it. So that's the HTML inside of the app. Okay. So I want you to talk to me, because at the end it says if name equals main app.run. So it's just going to run the app, and it says debug equals true. Can we deploy this code as is? Would that be great, or would it be kind of scary? Kind of bad on security and performance? Let me know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching on the rebroadcast. Let's see. Okay. All right, let's talk about it. Here are the questions. Okay, what is a security issue, or what security issue exists in the database query? Okay, so there must be some obvious issue with the database query. That's number one. See if you can answer. Pause the video and type in the chat if you can tell what the security issue is that exists in the database query. Okay, that's number one. We want to find the issue that's in the database query. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up so you can see the database query real quick. See where it says query? It says, okay, so basically it's getting the user ID from here by doing a request.args.get. Is there any problem with doing it that way? You tell me. Can you figure out whether that's a problem or if it's not? And if so, you can suggest your solution. Tell me what you think. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight what it's talking about because it says this is the dashboard, right? This is the dashboard. And this is the definition, right, of the dashboard route. And it's saying that the user ID is being gotten. It's calling the get ID, and then it's going to put it in here inside the query. Once it gets assigned a value from the request. Okay, anything wrong with that? Okay, well, that's the question. It wants to know, number one, what security issue is in the database query? Number two, how could one user view another user's expenses? Is that even possible? Can one user view another user's expenses? Tell me. Do 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 do. All right, let's see. Yeah, let's see if there's a vulnerability and what that possibly is. The application does trust whatever value the user supplies in the URL. For example, suppose Alice logs in and her records are associated with user ID equals 1. The application might generate a URL like dashboard user ID equals 1. If Bob knows it's the URL structure, he can simply change it to user ID equals 2. If the application does not verify that Bob owns user ID equals 2, it will return Alice's financial data. Well, not necessarily whoever belongs to user ID equals 2, right? Not necessarily Alice's, right? Because she's user ID number 1. But if for some reason you put in an arbitrary user ID that might actually be a valid user ID, it returns somebody else's information. This is called insecure direct object reference, also known as broken access control. Okay, so when we're looking at this and we see this user ID and it just getting whatever, and then the person sees the app route, then obviously they're going to say, oh, I know, I can just put in that user ID and see somebody else's information. Okay, so that's what we got to keep it secure. And we're going to discuss the possible solution into this problem in just a moment, but I wanted to review with you the actual problem. Okay, number 3. What problem could occur with the database connection? What problem do you think could occur with the database connection? Let's look at the database connection, shall we? Okay, I'm going to get another pen color. I'm going to set it up, fuchsia. And let's see. What could possibly happen with the database connection? What problems you think that you can imagine might happen? Let me see. Anybody got an answer for me? Okay. I'm going to hold on tight and see if you can see a problem with the database connection. Are there any typical or warning signs or things you might think of as a problem? So, to be honest, this video is more for intermediate or advanced users, people who already know code. So, this is really not a um, beginner coding exercise. This code review is really for like intermediate to advanced users, okay? Um so if you would like a beginner type video, I want you to let me know in the comments in the chat if you'd like to see some other beginner type code review. Let's see. So we're on question number 3, and so I just wanted to know if you have ideas about that. Okay. What problem could occur with the database connection? Do you know? And I'm gonna wait a little bit. Do 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 do. All right. So, in the original code, the database connection is opened but never closed. That is the problem. We need to know that database information is no longer available within the code. So there can be resource leaks. Okay. So each request, it creates a new database connection. If many users start accessing the application, unused connections can accumulate and consume, right? So we got memory leaks, file descriptors, operating system resources. Over time, this can degrade the application performance. So we could slow things down a little bit. Okay, so we need to make sure that we close our connections. All right, with a simple con.close, we can just really alleviate this performance issue. Okay, so that's one of the things, right? Database locking errors can happen with SQLite because of multiple readers accessing, you know, if the connection stays open longer than necessary, you may get errors like the database is locked. This is especially common when users simultaneously add expenses, update budgets, delete transactions, all kind of things are happening at the same time, and you have all these open connections and they're never closed. So it's so important to close the connection. Okay. And also, did we even commit the changes? Hmm. I don't know that we committed the changes. Whenever we make changes, or did we make any changes? That's a good question. Let's look at the code. Let's see if we made any changes to the code. I think all we did really was look at it. We did a select. So select is like a view. So we're getting a view of the information that's in there. So we really didn't change anything, right? So that's not a problem. We're just viewing and displaying all the expenses. We did add them up. We did make a calculation. We did add them up. That much we did. But again, we didn't change and we didn't update anything. Okay, so let's continue with these questions. Um, why is using render template string a poor choice here? Why shouldn't we do that? That's a good question. Why is that a bad choice? Let's see if anybody can answer. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Fruit. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Okay, so if you had a chance to think about it or maybe even looked it up, we will not use template string, not because it's not secure, okay, but it's usually the wrong choice for production. So we don't want to put that type of import in production because it mixes presentation with application logic and increases maintenance risk. So that talks about maintainability, maintaining this long term. So really the problem is that if you use this sort, um, it's going to be responsible for your database, your business logic, and your presentation logic. So this violates separation of concerns, right? So all this logic is all mixed up together, and it's really not giving you the right um, modularity or separation of concerns, as I said. Okay. So it's not very well maintained. It's not maintainable. So when you go to do something else, if your application grows and then you have HTML embedded in the Python, it's going to get really hard to kind of read, debug, reuse, update, all that stuff. Right now, this is really basic, but it's not modular. Okay. So simple changes is going to require you to edit your Python files instead of your dedicated templates. Notice we don't even have a template assigned. We just have a built-in HTML string. Okay, notice. Okay. Now I want you to notice that it just has this HTML and not a template. Okay, so better to use render template than to use render template string. Okay. So when you have hundreds of lines of HTML inside of a Python string, that's messy. That gets really, really messy really fast, right? So you don't want to use this type of Flask template system with files because then it's not really reusable. Yeah, you can just, you know, just lose a lot of good information, or this allows every page to share navigation menus, headers and footers, CSS, Java, and common page layouts. So with the template, it's better. Yeah, definitely better. Okay. On the files. You got, designers, they expect the HTML in its own folder, its own like separate folder called templates. Okay. When you start maintain the code, you might have um a dashboard template. You might have an admin template. You might have a login template. There's different template which are different like or separate HTML files that you can call on or go to or add on to your display to handle your um, your Flask app. Okay. Why it's not a good choice. Now, number 5. Risk comes from running this application with debug mode enabled. Okay. Now let's go back up right there actually at the top. But I'll go ahead and circle 5 since we are on number 5. Okay. What risk comes from running this application with debug mode enabled? I'm going to give you a minute to think about it or research it. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. I know. Let me know if I'm a little corny, a little cheesy, but you can kind of like skip over that. um, if you listen to my little do, that's okay too. So we want to figure out what kind of risk come with using that debug equal true, and basically, it's not really good for production. So if you have a Flask app, it's convenient while you're developing, while you're doing it. So say for instance, you are um doing it in VS Code and you were setting everything up and you're testing it and all that, then that's okay. But it introduces some security risk if you enable it in production environment. So what it does is it automatically um reloads the code, you know, when it's turned on. Then um it'll show you detailed error page. That's another thing that it does when it's on. It also has an interactive debugger. So that means you can like be debugging uh, as it's being ran. But no, you don't want to do that when it's in production, when all the bugs basically have been fixed. These features, really help developers diagnose issues quickly, but then they expose some information that attackers can use, right? So we don't want to do that. They might see your file paths. They might see some of your source code snippets. They might see some environment variables. We don't want that. Environment variables are like secret keys and things like that. Some private keys. Things that keep your information secure. So we want API keys or secrets to remain secret. So we don't want to install packages. To have their versions exploited so it could tell all the package information, if you will. So that's what it's all about. So here are the solutions. Let's review them. So problem number 1, it uses parameterized queries instead of string interpolation. Okay. So number 2, it's missing some authentication. And use the authenticated user session rather than a URL parameter. Number 3, use a context manager with SQLite 3.connect. So you want context manager instead of the way it was set up. Also, you want to move the HTML into a separate file. Remember I was telling you about the templates folder? So we need a templates folder, and we need to use render template instead of render template string. Okay, number 5, we want to make sure debug is not true. Okay, for deployment reasons. All right, so we want to make sure that that's not that. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to the code review of the solutions. So basically the correct code, right? So basically we want to provide some production ready solutions to the 5 issues that were identified. In the Flask budget tracker code review exercise. So we're going to look at what that will actually look like. Okay. So if you're watching, if you have any questions, I want you to ask in the chat. Okay. So the first thing we look at is the SQL injection prevention with parameterized queries. Okay, so why it matters is, we want to use parameterized queries to separate SQL commands from user input. Okay, never build SQL statements with F strings or string concatenation. We don't want to do that. Notice it says never. That means don't ever. Yeah, we don't want to ever do that. Okay. So what does a good solution look like? What does SQL injection look like? Let's see. So we see cursor.execute, and then we see a string. Select category amount. Notice before, what was it before? We didn't have it go straight into the cursor.execute. We had cursor.execute, open parenthesis, and then we had like an assignment statement for the query. Okay, so we didn't, instead of saying query, we just injected the string right there. Okay. And then put the user ID next after that. Okay, so that's how we would handle that. Let's look at number 2. Authenticated user. Let me see. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Authenticated user session. So we want to retrieve the user ID rather than a URL parameter. Okay, so we want to go get it. The user identity. It should be established during the in the session. So we want to import that. Should have been one of our imports from the session. Then we can get the user ID. Okay, so that's a way to separate out the correct user ID so we can authenticate the person. We want to make sure we're talking who we're talking to. Okay, so we definitely want to use that. Number 3, we're going to use a database context manager. So we're going to use the with clause. So we're going to say with connect. So in case there's a problem with the budget, then we can kind of mitigate that. Okay, so we can say with SQL3.connect and then get that budget. And we can give an alias, con, and then set it up .row. Okay. And then we'll keep going until we get to the user ID. Okay, and then we'll fetch all. We'll do the fetch all. Okay. Okay, number 4. For the template maintenance and render template, remember we're going to use render template instead of render template string because we want to store HTML files in a separate template directory or folder, however you want to call it. It keeps the presentation logic separate from application logic for better maintainability and reuse. So that way, if the lead or the senior wants to give a specific HTML for update, they can just do that and you can just be updating that file as opposed to having the file all jumbled up into the main app. Okay. Okay, so here's an example of using render template. So we can have a separate dashboard.html file that is called by render template. And then expenses equal expenses and total equal total. So separating all the information so that it can give it back to the main calling Flask app. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Last but not least, we have the safe debug configuration. Okay. Safe debug configuration. And let's see why it matters. We want to use an environment variable to enable debug mode only during local development. Never deploy an application with debug mode enabled. So we're going to import OS. Okay. Import OS. And then if the name equals main, then we want to run the app. And the Flask debug has to be false. Okay. All right. That's what we want to do. Okay. So let's look at complete secure dashboard route. Let's see what the whole thing really would look like. So we got app route, dashboard, and guess what? There's a decorator called login required. Login. So they already have to come with already authenticated, right? Then the dashboard has a user ID for the session. And then you're going to connect to SQLite with a with clause. And then you're going to connect by the row Okay, and then you're gonna go to the cursor and you're gonna execute this query built in and use the user ID. Okay, and then you'll be able to fetch all the expenses. Afterwards, the total will be calculated expense amount for expense and expenses. So basically, it's like done all in one. So it's going to do a sum. It's going to keep on, see this for loop for expense and expenses. It's going to basically get that amount and add it, keep adding it, summing it up. Okay. And assign it to total. Finally, we have return render template, which is going to pull up the dashboard.html file where the expenses equal expenses and the total equal total. So this implementation, it combines authentication, parameterized queries, context managers, template separation, and safe configuration practices. That's what we want to see in our application. What are your questions? If you have any, make sure you drop them into the comments. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you like, subscribe, put in the comments, share this video with somebody, a classmate you might have or whatever. If you're taking a class or you're learning how to code, definitely let me know. And I'll be sure to make more videos like this one. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.